In 2022, Jake Wightman became the first British world champion over 1500 metres, which was my distance back in the day, since Steve Cram in 1983, so 39 years. And then we've come out to the Budapest World Championships this year, and actually only 2 nights ago, Josh Kerr, also from Great Britain, has followed up and won the World Championships in the same event this year. So I wanted to catch up with Jake and talk through last year's race, how it went for him, and how he ended up being the best in the world. So I did this with one of my old races last year, which I was really excited to do, but actually was quite nervous when I did it. So how are you feeling?
I think once it starts, you bring back all the emotions that you feel, because you know at every single point in the race exactly how that feels. And I've seen little clips of it in the past year, but I haven't watched the full race in its totality, so it might be a little bit funny to bring back some of those emotions.
Yeah, nice. I'd have been watching it every day. But to give some context, the year before this had been the Olympics, and then I guess how did that go, and how had your season gone to this point and the qualifying rounds? How were you feeling?
I was 5th at the World Champs in 2019, and then I broke the 3:30 barrier in 2020, which I thought that was like 2 big steps towards hopefully getting a medal in Tokyo. So the whole year I was just obsessed with, I'm going to medal in Tokyo, it's going to be amazing, and I ended up having just an awful race and nothing I could do about it. I didn't make any tactical mistakes, I just wasn't good enough, and I finished 10th place. So for me, that was almost the best thing that could have happened, because it made me realise exactly what I needed to change. One of my mistakes in Tokyo was I won my semi-final, and partly that was because in Doha I got through as the fastest loser, or the non-automatic spot.
So Doha was the 2019 World
Champs. I got through by 0.02 of a second, and I was just so scared that that was going to be an outcome again, that I wanted to try and win my semi-final, and I think that probably had a negative effect. So all I wanted to do through the previous rounds, my heat and semi-final at these World Champs, was get through without anyone speaking about my name, just being safely through, but as conservative as possible.
And that's hard though, because you've got to have the confidence that you're good enough to not have to go all out. I think I often felt that in the semi-finals, I was going to have to run it like a final just to make sure I was through. So if you had the ability to just hold a little bit back and not feature.
I felt a sense of calm, because I was like, I've done everything I possibly can here to be in the best shape and the best position I possibly could be. Therefore, if it doesn't go how I plan, it doesn't matter, I've done everything, and it's not for my fault of not trying, it just wasn't meant to be.
So everyone lines up at the beginning and the camera pans across. What are you thinking? I hated this bit. I never wanted to be too light-hearted, and then the irony was I was thinking about it so much that I might as well have just waved anyway.
So every single person is waiting for themselves coming up on the screen.
Yeah.
But my thing has always been just stay as relaxed as possible. So I'd never be one to showboat or do anything ridiculous, but it's mainly just looking that you're calm and ready.
All 3 Olympic medalists are in this race, and the champion from Tokyo wants this world title desperately. A big roar as the men's 1500 metre starts.
So we're off. I've got another question for you. You're actually on the inside, which I hated. Did you think about then how you were going to get out? Whether you wanted to get to the front or whether you were just going to let them drift past?
Yeah, so because I do a lot of 800s, I generally can get out a bit quicker than others, so I've never really worried about it. Mine was just that I need to get into a position where I didn't want to be outside of really the top 3 or 4.
Yeah.
That was the game plan from the start, was always be close enough to the front to be able to react to anything and not have to exert too much energy making a big move.
Yeah.
Wightman's in 3rd, Chariot trying to come round, and so too is McSwain.
Ingebrigtsen's the one everyone talks about. He was the big favourite. He's on the outside there in about 6, just moving up. Were you thinking about anyone else at all in the race?
There's 12 people, there's 11 others that can be a threat. It's if you look at one person, then you could end up having somebody outside of that ending up disrupting it and winning the race. But I knew that Jakob at some point was going to come to the front, but at this stage it was Timothy Chariot was running well, Josh was running well, Abel Kipsang, who's leading there, was running well, so you knew Jakob was going to be the danger at some point, but not necessarily from the start.
So now you can see him, he's just in your eye line on the outside. There must be an element where you're okay, right, I've got to watch this.
Yeah, so I just wanted to always be within striking distance of anything that happened. I just made sure that if I did any passing, like here on McSwain, I did it on the straight, so I didn't waste any extra distance going around the bend.
Now Jakob Ingebrigtsen doing what he so often does. The Olympic champion leads, the fastest man in the world this year, Abel Kipsang in 2nd.
Yeah, so we're coming up to 2 laps to go. Now is, I guess, when it starts to get real. You're coming around to 700 metres to go. Yeah. And that's in my mind, was when you've got to push and really pay attention.
Yeah, so a lot of it, you can get distracted, 800 here, you can look at that time.
Yeah, 151.
That's quick.
That's just people watching, 151's unbelievable. And in previous championships in previous eras, that relatively unheard of. You would have had El Garouge, who's the current world record holder still. He always had a teammate from Morocco pace him in a world champs because he wanted to go fast. Now this is just people sharing at the front, and you've got 151, which is basically world record pace.
Part of it is you're peaking for this moment, so therefore you're in the best probably PB shape you've ever been in as well. So 151 felt as easy as it ever has on this day also. So even if I had known the time, I would just probably not have registered it, and yeah, just being content to keep going that pace, because at this point I felt pretty not comfortable, because you never, like you're saying, you never do feel comfortable, but I felt in control of my running at this point still. The thing you notice more is you have screens within the stadium, and I spend more time looking up at the screens to see where like the threats and the athletes are going to be dangerous.
So you're doing that in the middle of the race whilst like
yeah,
this sort
so
of,
it'd be like, especially with somebody, say if Jakob was behind still, you glance up and just see where he is.
So I never really looked at the screen unless I was in like literally the last 100 metres.
Yeah, sometimes you can get too tense by looking at the screen because you're aware that someone might be coming, whereas if you're a bit more blinkered, there's definitely pros and cons to it, isn't
It's hard, isn't it? Also, I ran so long ago, the screens would have been tiny.
Black and white,
yeah, exactly. Yeah. They're in like 4:3 aspect ratio.
No, I don't think you were that long ago.
So Ingebrigtsen's, this is like where he's really gone to the front.
Yeah, so the thing my dad said, who was my coach before, was just don't give him an inch. So like when he hits the front, like you always have to just be with him, because if you give him 10 metres, you're never getting that back.
The Olympic champion against the defending world champion, and they are side by side as they come round with 500 metres to go.
My coach used to say to me, get in their shorts. That was like his expression of like how close you need to be to them. Yeah. And then that made me think, weirdly, when I was running, everyone ran in split shorts. Yeah. I think you're the only one.
The era's changed, but my thing is that I never train in split shorts. I always train in half tights.
Exactly the same. That's what I would have done.
Because for me, like split shorts is race day. Yeah. I was getting excited, getting a bit of adrenaline at this point.
500 to go, everyone picks up.
Yeah, it's just people start to panic in the situations they're in. But I was in a good situation, so I still felt relaxed and calm.
So at some points, I'd have been running splits in races here where like we're 10 seconds slower at this point.
Yeah, that's if I was to choose how I'd want a race to go, I would love for it to be a slow race. But that just isn't reality. Like one person like myself can't swap a race. For Jakob, it's just a war of attrition. He's just survival of the fittest, where he'll gradually try and break athletes one by one until, hopefully for him, he's the last man standing.
And it's so hard to appreciate, but like he's getting faster every 100 metres basically.
Yeah, it's really subtle.
You can't see it, but if you were to look at the splits and be in the race and feel it, it's the worst feeling ever, right?
Yeah, it's like you feel your legs gradually getting more and more tired, but you aren't really aware that it's happening.
Listen to the roar, listen to the roar at the bell.
So this is always the scariest point. I always think this first bend, because people make silly moves around here and can potentially box you in and ruin your whole race by not giving you the position on the back straight.
Yeah, so then you've just come out off the bend to give yourself that space.
Yeah, so that was the point where I realised that Jakob had a little bit too much of a gap, and I was like, if I need to make my move, I have to be closer. Yeah. So I made a slight move there, but still felt good enough to be able to go again. Yeah. And all I wanted to do with him at this point was beat him to the bend, which part of it was like cutting them a little bit, which tactically that's just like racing to like disrupt them a little bit. So at this point it was just, I knew I'd made my move, it was decisive, and all I had to do was try and hang on, but it's so much easier said than done. He'd never been passed the whole season, so for me it was, I'd ran pretty well the whole year by controlling the bend, so my whole aim was never to be flat out round the bend, kicking really hard. It was always to make a move to get to the front and then kind of cruise the bend a little bit, not cruise but control it, so that if somebody wants to come past, they have to run wide and they're going to run more distance.
Yeah. And so before we see the finish, the magical bit here is there's an amazing clip of someone special commentating in the stadium at the same time. So your dad was the stadium commentator, right?
Yeah, so he did like your 2012 Olympics as well, so he's been the stadium announcer for every big champ.
It's the voice of athletics championship.
Yeah, and he has the option not to do the 1500, but for him, I think potentially because he's my coach as well, it takes the nerves and stress off him watching. Yeah. But also I think he's always hoped that he could potentially be part of this sort of moment. And when I was younger, I had so many races where I came into a senior race out of juniors, and I was so bad he never even got to mention my name, and he had to ask me, how did you do? Yeah. And I was like, well, you watched the race, and he was like, yeah, but you're so far back.
I was commentating on the guys at the front.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, wow.
So for him to actually be able to be calling my name at the front of a race in a World Champs final, trying to win it, is a pretty special moment.
Yeah, and you could tell he can't quite contain himself. Like, no, who could though? He stood up, he's like, but he managed to be like the consummate professional.
Yeah,
actually called the race.
I think he likes me. That's the thing.
Yeah.
This is a brilliant run by Wightman. What a story it would be if he took the title.
At what point do you know that you've won?
So there was no screen, so I couldn't see, so I was just hoping that he wasn't going to come past.
Ingebrigtsen's trying, he's closing, but he's looked over his shoulder. Jake Wightman with the performance of his lifetime denies the Olympic champion, the world crown, in total disbelief.
A lot of the disbelief is just that the race is done. The race is done and that's what's just happened. If I could bottle up the 20 seconds after you cross the line, that is the biggest high, that moment.
So often, Wightman has missed out, just off the podium in Doha, run out of it in Tokyo. He joins Steve Cram as a world champion.
Josh Kerr, my teammate who went into that hoping for the same outcome, was the first person to come up to me. He kept saying to me, "You're world champion, like soak it in." The respect for not only my teammates but my friends to come up to me when they're probably a bit disappointed with their run, but still be able to make me feel like as good as I can about it.
Josh has then had his moment this year, so I guess it's been amazing to relive this with you, but then you must be excited about Paris 2024.
I was there with Josh the night after his win with his family, like having drinks, celebrating for him, and I felt emotional when I saw him because how he showed me like his emotion at the end of that and still celebrated me. I felt emotional for him because I was like, that's a huge moment for him. And you saw after he was like in tears, like crying with his family. Like for me, it was more just a shock. I was in shock of it more because it was like, I can't believe that's just happened. It was like something I believed could, but not necessarily something that I expected at all.
He so richly deserves this, Wightman.
At that moment, I was like, whatever else I do, it doesn't have to be anything special. Like I hope it is, but if I do nothing else in this sport, I will retire and finish happy and as a world champion. And it's like a title against your name that you dream of as a kid, and I'd actually gone and done it in that moment was just the most surreal feeling.
What an incredible race, but I've got a question for you. I want you to let me know in the comments who you would like me to sit down with next and what questions I should be asking. What is it that you would like to know? And if I can be a little bit self-indulgent, then I think you should check out this video next, which is me running a race.